Welcome to Velocity Philosophy. Today we talk to Juliano Sanchez, Director of Athletic Performance at Jesuit Dallas. We specifically reached out to Juliano because we wanted to talk about engagement, and who better to talk to about engagement than a high school coach. There's some great content here. I particularly like the discussion around drop-offs. It just made my heart sing to hear a coach talk about programming your drop-offs on GymAware and setting the athletes up with it. In fact, he gets the athletes to do it, which is really cool. Jay, what about yourself? What should people be listening out for in this interview?
Yeah, one thing that I thought was interesting is like a lot of high school coaches think that technology can interfere with the weight room training, but he actually embraces it. You know, he limits the freshmen to what they can and can't use, but he slowly introduces it over time. And I thought that was really interesting because, yeah, he's actually using GymAware to sort of teach them about velocity-based training. You know, if you're under the zone, it's too heavy. If you're over the zone, it's too light. We want you right in the zone. So I thought that was really interesting that he's actually using GymAware to teach the students. So yeah, you reckon we get into it, Will?
We wanted to talk about engagement, and that word is it's bandied around a lot. So I figured actually a really good place to start was to ask you, in your words, what does that mean? Why is it important? And also, if we remember the 3 points, we can ask it again. What does that look like? Can you measure it? Do you see it as a coach? What is engagement in the weights room?
So obviously, yeah, I mean, a lot of sports performance, strength and conditioning terms have been really generalized, like things like culture and like things like grit, those kind of words. But when I think of engagement, and again, to remind everybody, I work in the high school setting. I have athletes whose training age, for the most part, is a maximum of 4 years old. I got them as freshmen, and I get them all the way to their senior year. So, an engaged athlete, in my opinion, is an athlete who shows up on time, ready to work, is suited up, is in their correct gear, knows. I mean, we have online programming through Team Builder, so an engaged athlete, if they know they're going to train that day, they've already opened up Team Builder, have already seen the training, have already started kind of mentally preparing what they're going to be experiencing up in the weight room with me that day. And then once they get into the weight room, they've showed up on time. They're locking on their warm up. They're talking to other athletes. They're motivating other athletes. They're getting guys on track. Everyone can understand that, and everyone has seen when they walk into a weight room, a group of guys is either, chatting with each other, kind of, just having conversation. And that means they're kind of ready to train, and they're kind of goofing around with one another. They're ready to go. And then, if you're, I train basketball. If you're into the month of February, you got 1 month to go, and guys kind of walk in silently one by one after one another, and, silently grab a foam roller, that they might need something a little bit different than what might be on the card that day. So, an engaged athlete is a guy that shows up, ready to work, ask questions if he doesn't understand something. A lot of my younger athletes are still kind of treading the line of, am I allowed to ask questions? Because the way that we kind of train guys as we go through the years, and I got this from one of my mentors at Michigan State, is that, when you first get an athlete, especially when they're young, it's kind of like an authoritarian environment where, I have all the answers, you guys need to listen to everything I say and do. And only after you've put in time and you've invested and you've bought into the system, and are you allowed to have becomes a more democratic system. So, a lot of my higher performers, let's say varsity lacrosse, if I get a lot of guys who are coming up to me before lift and they say, hey, Coach Saran is the lacrosse coach. We had a 2-hour practice this morning, and we're all feeling it. I'll take that into more consideration than a freshman who has just started lifting 3 months ago, and ask me a question. Hey, I'm kind of sore. It's going to be like, well, do you even really know what sore is? So I guess I'm kind of wandering off here already, but yeah, an engaged athlete is someone who just shows up, ready to work, ask questions, willing to and willing to motivate others to get them all on the same page. And then what was the second point?
I think you answered them all in one go. It was, what does it mean? What does it look like, and how do
Yeah.
you spot it? But I'm pretty sure you covered all that.
Right on. Cool.
So in terms of some of the different technologies, can you sort of outline how you use the different sort of tech to create engagement in the weight room?
Absolutely. So I would say that like the engagement from technology really begins even before we get them as freshmen at Jesuit. So a lot of the times, I mean, probably at least 2, 3, 4 times a day, there'll be a tour group that comes up to the weight room. Our facility, for high school, Jay, you can speak on this. We have an amazing facility. It's a couple hundred square feet, over 9,000. So it's over 9,000 square feet, 28 fully equipped racks. And we got obviously barbells, bumpers, dumbbells, but we have, safety squat bars. We got trap bars. We are very, very blessed when it comes to the amount of space we have and the amount of equipment that we have. And we can be very versatile with our training. And I mean, when those kids come through with their families, and for the most part, yeah, we're pitching to the kid, but we're also pitching to the parent as well. We would show them everything we got. And we 6 gym aware units. Hopefully we'll add some more here in the coming future. And we talk about that, when I talk to a parent and I discuss and I say, traditionally with percentage-based training, as you guys know, research shows that, I don't know the exact number, but depending on your readiness level, your preparedness level, that 1 RM percentage number can fluctuate. I think it's more than 20%. And so, the thing I always talk about is kids do so much nowadays, whether it's, club soccer being year round, or they go right from soccer and they go right into lacrosse. And then after lacrosse season, now they're playing both soccer and lacrosse during summer. Well, okay, now we have this great tool in GymAware that instead of me guessing, okay, we're going to go 90% for singles, it's like, okay, well, is that kid an actual 90% or is his true 90%? Am I training him at 110% that day? GymAware, and I tell this to the parent, GymAware allows me to, instead of prescribing percentage, I'm prescribing a velocity. And as you guys know, the barbell speed never lies, right? If the kid's popping on all cylinders, he'll hit his weights, he'll hit his velocity. But if at that prescribed weight, the velocity is not happening, weight has to come off. And the kids, for the most part, understand that when we get to that system. The parents at this point, their eyes are this wide, and they're already like kind of ready to sign their kid up, especially if their kid's an athlete. On top of GymAware, we also utilize TeamBuildr. It's an online platform for programming, and TeamBuildr has been really, really good to Jesuit. We've had it ever since I've been there. It was my first time utilizing online programming. Before that, I was always an Excel spreadsheet kind of guy. But it's really good because TeamBuildr has a messaging system. You can take attendance in it. Very, very versatile, and they're always adding things, just like you guys are always adding to their software to make it more user friendly. We also utilize, we have one set of laser timing gates, and I discuss that to the parents as well. And so similar to VBT, if I have you run, let's say you get back from Christmas break, and obviously sprinting is a skill, so maybe you won't be as fast as the end of the fall, but if you run a whatever it is 1.7 20 yard dash on day 1, and then I retest you in the middle of the season and we're not hitting those numbers, that's an auto-regulatory signal telling me I got to back off of volume or intensity or something, that the card isn't set in stone, and maybe we should make a change based off of that. And then the last piece of equipment, we have 2 more actually. We have just jump mats where you can test vertical and the time in the air, the displacement of the air gives you an inch reading. And so that's a really easy system to utilize, really easy to test. I can test 100 kids in probably 50 minutes because if we're all on the same page. Yeah. We have 2 of those. And then lastly, we just recently bought GPS through SPT, Sports Performance Tracking, which is a company out of Australia as well. And we had really good results with that, especially in the spring. It was my first time ever even having GPS. We got it last summer, and we kind of were working the bugs out of our own side in the fall. And by the time spring came around, I really started knowing what I was doing, and I was able to make some really good recommendations to the lacrosse coach. And we also, obviously because of COVID-19, we had to cancel the season early, but we finished the season. I think we played 8 games, won all 8 games, and we in Jesuit lacrosse was number 1 in like the Southeast region, which consists of Texas, Louisiana, Florida, and there are some really good Florida high schools out there. So we were really good, and I think at least at Jesuit, and I think a lot of high schools, you know, they always kind of err on the side of more. More is better.
Yeah.
You know, if we're not doing, they think a lot of the time they think it's not enough with what they do, and so sometimes it's like pedal to the metal all the time. And especially the lacrosse coach, he's been known. He's a great guy. He was a 4-time All-American at Syracuse, which is a really good lacrosse college. Very well respected. But you know, he, in times of like, I don't know, you know, in times of like making intervention, he's always more. Well, I was able to show him through data and even through VBT numbers is that, hey, these kids are not hitting the numbers that we want. They are fatigued from your 2-hour practice. Maybe we should think about dropping to 1 hour, and then I'll drop to 45 minutes. And that way, when game day comes on Friday, we know that they're ready to go fully recovered. That was kind of a long answer, but I present all the tech we have day one to all those parents and all those kids. And as the kids get more comfortable in the system and advance through the system we have at Jesuit, the more tech they're allowed to use because they've kind of, you know, pushed through the threshold of being, you know, a 1-year training age, and they've worked and they've developed capacity and all that kind of stuff.
This is, I'm ad-libbing this question a little bit, just as you're running through the different bits of technology. And I'm just thinking of that thing that comes up often. Well, we see it at least amongst the strength and conditioning community, where it's like, you know, be a bit cautious of technology. Technology is going to get in the way. You know, there's only some types you can use, and the rest is junk and whatever. But the way you're talking, it sounds like there's something about the coach, like you being engaged and you being willing to take it on board, and you approaching it with the right enthusiasm seems like a critical factor in that being an effective intervention with the athletes.
Yeah.
That piece of technology, I mean.
Absolutely. And I don't want anyone to think that watches or listens to this that we're using all of those things every day. That's not how it goes. At the end of the day, you know, hard work still works, and that's what we do. But I think, you know, especially when it comes to like this year, the good thing about being in high school is that really no matter what you do, the kids are going to get a little bit better just because they're going through maturation and adolescence and all that. But, you know, this year I kind of messed with more like lower percentages, higher velocity kind of stuff. And, you know, sometimes, whereas in traditional training on a bench press, I'm going to add, you know, 130 on week 1, then I go to 135 week 2. I'm talking pounds, not kgs here. And then I go to 140, right? I can see my own progress, but I think to a high school kid, when you start utilizing VBT, the weight is lighter, at least if you're training for power or speed. And so the kid doesn't really feel like the same progress he would by lifting those relatively heavy weights. And so by utilizing more tech, so if I were to do say we start a power block and I test you before, and we do vertical jump and we do our 20-yard laser timing gate. Then we go through that speed or power block and I test you again on those things. Well, maybe your weights weren't heavy, but I can show you through data, through your testing, that you improved at your actual athletic skill that you're trying to, you know, emulate on the field, rather than don't get me wrong, it's very important to get strong, but I'm talking about like my guys who are, it's my last go with them. It's our last semester. They're in season, or I guess it's the semester before their season starts. It's time to go. So I'm going to utilize everything I can to make sure our performance is as high as it is. Because a lot of people discuss, you know, LTAD and, you know, just strength training for a certain amount of time until you get 2 times body weight on a back squat. Well, for the most part, 95% of the kids I train as seniors, they're never going to play another sport ever again. Like in a real, you know, they're not going to go on to NCAA. And it's very rare we get a lot of any D1 guys. So why not, you know, push the limits on them during that last semester, as long as we built a solid foundation for the 3 years prior to that. So I think it's a great way to really gauge progress and to keep buy-in, especially when a kid might not understand why we're moving a lighter weight faster rather than just trying to strain and hit a 5 RM every single day.
Yeah. I think adults can struggle with that as well.
Yeah, no doubt. no doubt. I mean, yeah, hard work works still at the end of the day, I'll say.
Yeah, just bringing it back to GymAware in terms of like features, or I guess a combination of features.
Right.
Do you have any that you use to sort of create that engagement and intent with the students or athletes?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I utilized this year with GymAware would definitely be the percent drop-offs. And I think percent drop-offs are awesome with GymAware and in whatever, any system you might have, but obviously it's going to be the most reliable with GymAware, is that, you know, when a kid sees that he dropped off early, but he's not feeling fatigued, he's saying, okay, what am I doing? I need to lock in and engage. And then even if your spotter says, dude, you have more than that, it's external feedback. And I mean, as important as it is to have intrinsic motivation, having that external number telling you that you weren't fast enough, or you have to cut the set, that kid's going to come back, especially if he's a competitor and he is competitive in nature. He's going to want to try to beat that number. So, you know, if I got 4 reps and was cut off on my 5th rep, I had to rack it. If I come back and I get 6 reps, I've improved. So I think that's a great way to, it allows kids to really be engaged and to really drive intent behind every single rep. Because it's so easy to, you know, finish a rep and say, oh, that was a good rep. But then if you don't have that hard number telling you, oh, was it a good rep, or did you back off on the last, you know, quarter of that squat? Could you have driven all the way through and got your velocity a little bit higher? So I think that external feedback that you guys give is so important when it comes to percent drop-offs. I also think it was awesome because, say we have 3 guys on a platform and they're doing whatever. Say we're doing front squat. Well, if the first 2 guys were able to get 4 reps before being cut off, you can bet your butt that 3rd guy is saying, well, I better get at least 4 reps or these 2 guys are going to give me a hard time. You know what I mean? So it creates it creates friendly, but you know, real competition between lifters on the platform, which, as you guys know, only increases the intent of the session. So yeah.
How do you, just keeping on the drop-offs, just interested to hear more about that. What do you actually prescribe? Like, do you sort of have, because you're dealing with groups, often you find that you generalize a bit,
yep.
as your coaches will. So
yep.
do you have a rule of thumb, or what drop-offs do you prescribe? What percentage?
So I took my original drop-offs based off of Cal Dietz' triphasic book. He talked about, and obviously the book is, you know, that book came out, I think, almost 20 years ago now. So he has a lot of new methods that he utilizes, but in his book, he discussed, depending on how many days out you are, or when your next training session is, how much of a percent, and he used Tendo, but he talks about what percent drop off you should utilize depending if you train tomorrow, if you have a training session today, if you train tomorrow, if you train 2 days from now, if you train 3 days from now. So for the most part, at least the guys I utilize GymAware with, they're on a 3-day workout. So they do Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And so and then Cal said in his book that if it's 2 days out, he'll do a 5% drop off. So if I were to train, say if it was an upper lower split, we train 4 days a week, depending on the time of year, I'd most likely do a 2% drop off because they have to be recovered by the time they get back the next day. So just based off of triphasic training in Cal, 5% if it's 3 days. And if you're going to train, you know, if you lift on Monday and your game's on Friday, you're probably in your training for speed, you're probably gonna be safe doing, you know, a 4 or a, you know, 6% drop off or something like that.
Yeah. So how many reps do you think they're generally doing? I know that'll differ with the athlete and the weight,
right.
But this, I guess what I'm trying to get across for people that don't use drop offs is they're pretty tight percentages.
Yes. Yes.
So, you know, we're talking, or you're talking about keeping athletes game ready, they're fresh. Yeah.
Right. So the reps really depends on the kid's motor, right? And depends on kind of their fast twitch and slow twitch, what their makeup is. So, you know, if I get a kid who's like super twitchy, his numbers will be higher because he's so much more explosive. But because he's made up of type 2, he's not going to have the gas to really last for, you know, 6 reps if his percentage is 85%. If we're in a high force, low velocity block or whatever it might be. Whereas if we have like my crew guys who are mainly, you know, I mean, you have to be pretty powerful to be a crew athlete, to be a rower, but for the most part, you know, our rowing coach, Randy Dam, who does a great job, they get a lot of volume in. So a lot of them are really type 1. And, say for that same kid who's really twitchy and might only hit 3 reps, I could get a kid at the same percentage getting 6 reps before he's cut off. But that's because he's more comprised of type 1, and so he has more gas to hit a lower weight more times, if that makes sense. And then really, at any time of the year, really, like, so for crew, I didn't really peak them on speed. I peaked them on strength. And we were lifting, I think we got up to like almost 87% before their season got canceled, but it got canceled right before we were heading out to their big meet. And we were at about 90 or 87%. And some guys were hitting about, 3 reps before they would be cut off on the 4th rep. So it's about accurate, a 3 RM is 90%. And so they were kind of getting their 3 RM before being cut off. So it depends on the time of year, depends on the quality of your training. And it depends on the athlete's makeup as well. So that's the great thing about GymAware, though, and VBT in general. If I were to prescribe that mainly type 1 guy and the mainly type 2 guy, I'd probably be undertraining the guy that's made up of type 1 fibers.
Yeah.
Because whereas the type 1 guy is maxed out at 3, the type 1 guy is maxed out at 3.
Yeah.
Sorry. The type 2X guy maxed out at, guys, what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The type 1 guy has more in the tank because he has more capacity than the other guy. So that way I'm training exactly what I want to train, and I'm not undertraining one and overtraining the other.
So in terms of the you say the set gets cut off, is that 1 in the red or is that 2 in the red?
That's 1 red.
1 red under, and then you cut it.
It depends on how close we are to competition. So like for crew was the last team I really heavily utilized it before we got cut off from COVID. But we started the spring semester off, and it would be 2 reds and you're cut off. And of course, I mean, like, how GymAware, I can hit 1 rep, and if my second rep is faster, the first rep becomes red. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the current rep you're on.
Yep.
We started off 2 reds and you'd be cut off. And then as we got closer and closer to competition, it was have more intent behind every single rep. And when you get a red, we got to make sure we're accounting for recovery. You're done with the set. So it depends on really how close you are to competition and how much fatigue you're willing to accumulate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think also it's just a point. I guess it's a bit of a brag point, but what you're talking about, we understand what you're saying, and it's fantastic and it's really cool, but it actually only works if your numbers are accurate. So I don't want to get into the industry, the VBT industry, but you can do that because you have a GymAware, basically.
Right.
You can have a 2% cut off with the single rep performed under your target speed, and you can shut them off because you can trust that the numbers are what they're saying.
Absolutely.
And I don't know, I just wanted to throw that point out there, I guess.
Yeah.
And the question would be, have you ever considered that side of it? Or is it just something that you've been able to trust with GymAware?
So again, I inherited the GymAwares. My former boss, Jeremy Weeks, he's at Penn now, University of Pennsylvania. Him and his former assistant, Mihail Cahill, they were really into VBT. And I think they actually even did some research with Brian Mann. I can't tell you exactly what it was, but I know they were in a study together. I don't think it ever got published. But so I inherited them. And of course, I've had other reps come and visit, because everyone, I think we're the kind of halfway point between OU and UT. And so everyone says they're going to stop at SMU, which is in Dallas. And everyone, I think it's just well aware that, Jesuit is a very affluent school, and they, most reps think that we have money to spend, and sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But I've seen Push, and I've seen Perch, and I've seen all those companies, and I just think that unless you have that tether tied to the barbell, the numbers, it could be accurate sometimes, but sometimes it might not be. And when it comes to recovery and fatigue accumulation, you really want to make sure that your velocities are what they say they are every single time. And having the gold standard, I never have to think about it twice, because I know that your guys' numbers are accurate.
So just, I've obviously I was lucky enough to come and visit you guys at your facility, amazing facility. Right. Just for all the people that obviously at home that don't know, can you just run us through a bit of the setup? Like, I know your guys are like soldiers, they They know exactly what they're doing when they come in. You know, you get them running laps around the little track. Yeah, they're super engaged. So just in terms of the setup, like how does that sort of all play out?
I will say, to defend myself, you guys saw Crew. That's probably one of my most like bought in programs. Not everyone runs at the motor that Crew runs at,
Right.
but for the most part, all kids do a great job. So the way our weight room is laid out, and I inherited this layout, and it's worked so far, is that the main part of the room is 28, I guess it'd be 14 double-sided racks, with 4 kind of racks of dumbbells that kind of break the room apart into 6 platforms on one side and 8 platforms on the other. I think that makes, or it's, sorry, 12 on one side, 14 on the other. Or 16 on the other. Yeah, it's 8 and 4. Sorry. Anyway, so yeah, kids come in and we have kind of an open area that they do. If so say I'm working with one team, another team can kind of get started on their warm up in the open area. And as I call it the first wave, say it's in the morning, my first wave team will start at about 6:30 and end at 7:30. And as they're wrapping up, my second wave team is warming up in the corner in that open area at 7:15. And then we usually send them at 8:15 so they have time to eat and shower and eat. And just since the past 2 years, Jesuit has started including breakfast and lunch in the tuition. So they get fed every single day, breakfast and lunch, which has been an absolute game changer in regards to just keeping kids, fed and healthy and fueled up. So yeah, for the most part, as most other, American strength coaches, I think anywhere, most of the work is done on our platforms, and we have some cables that are in the corner as well that are kind of next to that open space. And then there's some cardio that's along the windows. And one of the main reasons I took this job is because the weight room has windows. Jay, I think I told you, I think I've only worked in like dungeons before I got to Jesuit. But yeah, it has a great view of downtown Dallas and kind of a little bit of uptown as well. It's got great natural light in there. And then we have some glute hams along the wall as well. So, for the most part, kids are on the rack. And then the way that lifting is structured, I make sure everyone kind of has the same block one. And then after that, or after for their accessory work, I'll send some guys to maybe some cable work. I'll send say that your B block is lat pull down. Well, I might have some guys go right away to lat pull down, but I might have some guys stay and do, rear foot elevated split squat. So there's no traffic jams going on anywhere.
Yeah, gotcha.
I would say, the only, especially now with COVID and everything like that, I think the only change I would really want to make in the weight room layout is like maybe having power blocks at every station. That way the kids don't have to go back and forth. And then I also am going to look into trying to get because we have pillars that go all along the wall, the 4 walls, is getting a cable pull down on every pillar. And that way there's more cable pull downs and kids don't have to travel. Like some kids have to walk, almost, probably say at least 40 yards from, if they're on one end of the room and have to go do cable pull downs, that's a long walk. So that'd probably be the only change I make. But yeah, for the most part, kids get in, understand the flow, get to work. And then we send them, by the time an hour is done, and some kids stay and do some like recovery stuff, and other kids are just trying to get out and go eat.
Yeah. And so like when you get a freshman in, do you sort of have to explain all the different types of tech, how the weight room works? Because I know that your crew, obviously, they just come in and they're like robots, really.
Oh God, they're good. Yeah.
They're setting up the gym awares. They're typing in all the different numbers. You don't, you just tell them, okay, we're working at these speeds, and they go and do it. So what's the process in educating the younger ones or the new?
So again, with the freshmen, it's more authoritarian, right? This is how we do it. This is why it's done. I'll never tell a kid not to ask me a question, especially if something is bugging them, like in their back or something like that. I always try to keep communication high, but I'm definitely not taking, any recommendations on exercise selection. Let's put it like that. So, but freshman year, like all my freshmen, we got all the way to May 13th before we got shut down. And the only tech those kids really utilized was the laser timing gate. We're not using any type of VBT. We're not using any type of Jumpman or anything yet. We're just trying to get them proficient in movement, get their movement pattern, get their motor patterning down, while also increasing their ability to perform work with external resistance. That first freshman year, I mean, I don't even use percentages. Like, it's just all pretty much, linear periodization. Add a little bit more weight if you can. If your form doesn't look good, you got to take weight off. That first year, I think, is crucial in their next 3 years of development, because if I try to advance kids too fast, I think it'll limit them. Their end product will be limited, rather than slow cooking them, taking it real slow, and making sure they understand all the rules and regulations and standards of the room. I think, again, Jesuit is very affluent. A lot of kids have really never been like talked at before. They've been like talked to by their mom and dad, hey honey, how's school today? But I don't think they've ever had the situation where it's like, hey, get your butt right, get on the rack, let's get working. They've never had that before. So it's really a year of kind of, and they test me back. They try to, whatever. I told you guys that we use Team Builder, so they're gonna be on their phones in the weight room. And day one, I tell them, and I have it written in paper, and it's a agreement that they sign. So one of my old mentors, Red Wakeham at Michigan State, his whole thing was, listen, they have to know the standards, they have to know the consequences on day one, so that way, in case a kid does break a rule, they don't feel like they're being unfairly treated because they don't know what the consequence is. So on day one, I tell them, your phone is for Team Builder and emergency purposes only. If I catch a kid on Snap, if I catch a kid on Instagram, the whole room pays for it. And we do up downs, and up downs have stood the test of time, baby. If the kid doesn't listen to you, and even if that kid is still goofing off, when I make the whole group up down, like that 10th up down, the whole room is on that kid, and he's back on track. So I've yet to find a better really consequence than group up downs and making everyone get back on task. But yeah, so that first year, it's motor patterning, it's increasing work capacity, it's learning the big basic lifts, slowly progressing them and getting them to understand what it is to truly, put some true work in. A lot of these kids come from white collar families. Their parents are high powered lawyers and doctors and CEOs and all that. But we have a blue collar mentality in that way when we get after it, and we don't do any shortcuts. So it's a year of slow cooking for the freshmen, and they see the older kids utilizing tech. And if kids ask me about it, I say, if you want to know about it, you got to work a little bit harder. And so that kind of gives kids more of an incentive to put their nose on the grindstone and try to get to that next level of programming and tool use and technology use.
When they do come around to having a gym-aware strapped to the bar,
yep.
How much VBT education do you deliver? Is there any formal component to that, or just how much do they know about the science and the numbers? Right.
So for the most part, I keep it really simple. I mean, you can talk to any high school strength coach, and our most valuable assets are time and resources. Well, we have a great resource, but I don't necessarily have the time to take away from training to explain all the, the frills that gym-aware comes with. So pretty much the way I frame it is, hey, this is a way to know that we're training the quality we want to train, whether that's absolute strength, starting strength, whatever it might be. We're training the quality we want, and we're making sure we're not pushing you guys too far over the edge. We'll take you to the edge for sure, but we're not going to have you go over that cliff. So, it pretty much starts with that, the reason why we do it. And then, I talk about the competition side of it. I say, hey, you know what? Whoever, I always talk, I have 2 coupons in my office. And it's a buy one, get one. One is a buy one, get one cheeseburger from Sonic, which is a fast food restaurant right across the street. And the other one is a breakfast burrito, buy one, get one. And I say, hey, the fastest velocity today, they get that coupon. And kids get kind of crazy on it. It's pretty funny. I still have yet to give the coupon out, so I still have it. But I discuss, hey, whoever is putting up that weight's going to get the respect from me that day. So make sure you guys have intent behind every single lift you do. And now, because I have you VBT'd, I will know if you have intent behind your lift or not, especially if I'm, cross-referencing percentages and stuff like that. Hey, according to your 1RM, you should move in this barbell a little bit faster than what you're moving. Is there something going on? Or did you get much sleep last night? Yada, yada, yada. And then let's say it's day one using VBT. All I do is I'll put in the top velocity I'm trying to hit, and I'll say if it's red, you got to take weight off. If it's gray, you got to add weight, because you guys know that if it's gray, then they're going over the prescribed velocity, and that's pretty much where I stop it at. I'll keep it like on even the GymAware light. I won't even have them go to like their own profile. And then pretty much every single time we train with GymAware, I'll kind of add another layer to it. So maybe on day 2, now you're selecting yourself every time you lift. And obviously before we start, and I think Jay, you actually helped me with this, is we'll put the guys into their group on their iPad. So they're not having to scroll through the whole thing. Now they just got 1, 2, or 3. They pick themselves, they're good to go, and then they hit their numbers. So, I mean, as much information as I have on it, I'll slowly give it to them every single time, so I'm not overloading them on day 1 and also taking away from my training time, because we still got to work. So
yeah, it's probably a really good way to do it. I don't have any questions, just picking up on a point, just to mention that if people aren't really familiar with velocity-based training, like the reason you can do that and say like anyone in the weights room, whoever gets the highest velocity gets the voucher, is because velocity is individualized.
Right.
They're lifting the weight that's appropriate to them, and then you can have everyone trying to smash it out and trying to hit that ceiling,
exactly right,
because they're lifting the right weight. So I like that point too. But I don't have any other questions, Jay.
Yeah, no, I think we've definitely taken up quite a bit of your time. We appreciate coming on and sharing your insights.
Of course.
Hopefully I'll be back there soon enough. But
yeah, I hope so. And I promise you, the first thing we do, if we have time, we're going to go to a shooting range and we're going to shoot some guns, baby. That's what we're going to do. Because anyone that's listening to this, if you go to America, you have to go to a shooting range and you have to shoot a gun. That's the rule. Okay, so everyone take a note. Find a place to do it. If you go to Texas, there's probably one every square mile, there's a shooting range. So there's no lack of that there. There's plenty of churches and there's plenty of shooting ranges in America, and especially Texas.
Gotcha. We'll lock it in.
Well, that's on record now.
Yeah.
Come over.
Right on. Hey, yeah, you guys are always welcome, of course. I've had Jay before, and the GymAware squad is always welcome in Jesuit Dallas. That's for sure.
Thanks so much for your time today, man.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll be in touch.
All right, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good one.